This is TWiT.
Jonathan Haidt, who I've had on Triangulation, he's a professor of, I think, sociology at, I think, NYU. He's written a great book about the right and left, why the past 10 years of American life have been uniquely stupid. And he puts the finger square on Facebook and Twitter, social media. And he's got a good argument, which I won't recreate, but he's got a very strong argument for how social media drives us to the corners, drives us to the extremes. That America is essentially politically in the vast center, very centrist. But the problem is, thanks to these amplification systems, these amplification algorithms, the extreme left and the extreme right have outsized power.
I would argue that, I mean, they may have accelerated it, but they didn't start it. As Billy Joel said, they didn't start the fire.
Right.
The fire, and I think that the fire, if we start looking at the fire, I think we'd probably go back to Lee Atwater. So the thing is that there was an assumption in the 80s, in the late 80s, that or he came across this idea that Karl Rove picked up speed on later in the 90s, which was that you don't have to pay attention to the center.
You do the social,
you have to get the core.
You do the social politics gets the core, the base.
Either side. Get the core energized and get the opposition not to show up.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to do to win. Yeah. And he proved that he could do that. Karl Rove proved that he could do that. And both sides employ it now. Is that you get the core to show up, and there's an incredible amount of energy spent on that.
I will agree with you. The motivation was there, but in the past they've had advertising and things like that. Now they have a weapon, a super weapon.
Oh, yeah.
An aim from space.
But I'm saying
Twitter
it didn't start there.
I agree with you. They didn't invent it.
There was this. But we saw this in the 90s where we were going, oh no, this is what's happening to politics. Started splitting in the mid 90s because the campaign started splitting. They started in the 80s, but it really started splitting. The campaign started, and then it started taking over. Because you just realized you could win that way. And I think and then all of this stuff, it gets accelerated. And I think that there's a lot of good points in that article. One of the things of only verified users get amplified, I think is a really good idea. I think that the real issue is not allowing machines to, the biggest problem I think in almost all of these things is not allowing machines to post. It has to be a person to post it, and because the thing is that I did some tweet. I remember years ago I did a tweet, and I have no idea why it got so many. It was running for months. It was getting huge numbers of stuff. Some bot latched onto it. It wasn't. Right. I looked at it. It was like an innocuous tweet, but it fulfilled some model of disinformation. And I deleted it. I was like, I don't know why this is being used, but I don't want it to be used, and I just took it out. But it was because I kept on watching it. It was just one tweet that was, again, very like, I don't like ABC TV or something. I don't like this show. It was like something like that. It was
Haidt, who, by the way, wrote a fantastic book called The Righteous Mind, which I highly recommend. Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, which talks about that kind of trend, that the Atwater Rove trend that you were talking about. But in this article, in which it's kind of eulogizing America, he says things changed in 2009 when Facebook offered users the like button and Twitter offered the retweet button. Those amplification mechanisms are exactly what you're talking about, whether it's wielded by humans or bots. Of course, I think it's part of the problem with Twitter. I know they try to get rid of bots, but I often have the feeling that at least half of my followers are bots. They're not humans.
Remember when retweeting was something you did manually? And
by hand.
Cutting and pasting, and it was hard. I mean, that might in some ways almost have been a better way to go about it, to put a little friction into the process. On
TweetDeck, I could turn off retweets. I do, and it is a very different Twitter, by the way, without the viral amplification of retweeting.
I block so many things in Twitter, and then I follow. I have like 110 terms. Anytime I see a term, I go, I don't like that tweet. I look at a word in there that makes it unique, and then I go into the word block and I say block all the tweets like that.
Right.
And then I have all these great people that I follow that are everything coders and sound designers and all. I have a great Twitter. I mean, I have to admit, whenever it complains about it, I'm like, I don't understand what everyone's so upset about, because mine is great.
I agree. I have a great Reddit. There's awful stuff on Reddit, but I don't follow. If you don't follow it, you don't have to worry about it. And you could do the same thing with Twitter. I don't know if that makes Twitter a better place for everybody or just for you.
No, it doesn't. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be. If you're I find going to Twitter to be enjoyable and fun because I've gotten rid of almost everything I didn't want that makes me stressed. Like I was like, I'm not here to, Twitter is not a good source of news, like it is, so I took, things out. I don't care whether it's news or not. I go to other things like Tech Meme, like regular, bunch of other news organizations to get news. And Twitter, I go to have fun, hang out.
Yeah.
See interesting things.
Yeah. Twitter, I just go to see who died. Because if you're trending, chances are you're dead.
So what I've been asking people all week is, let's say Elon does take over Twitter. Let's say he brings in a whole new regime and how things are done. Is there something that he could do that would kill Twitter for you? And because I've been asking people, like, Twitter has been famous for not iterating on its product, but I feel like they know that it's so delicate that they don't want to do it. So if he comes in there and stomps around and changes a whole bunch of stuff, would it be certain people, like the people that you love following, leaving? Like what would be the thing for any of you that would make you be like, well, Twitter used to be great, but I just don't do it anymore?
That's a really good question.
Higher character count.
Did it get worse for you when they went to 280?
No. I think the current number is
280 is
great.
good. Okay.
But I think it's great. I think that 140 was a little cramped. I think the current number is really good. But I think that if we made it longer than that, I'd stop using it because it'd just be, oh my gosh. Like if I see an article that's too long, I'm like, okay, that's a lot of words. So I think that the longer that would probably be. I think the biggest problem is that they're just going to get a lot of regulation. Like if he does he can say whatever. Maybe he can say whatever he wants. But Twitter is going to be in all kinds of hot water if it starts to dramatically change in a direction that makes countries concerned. And so I think that's more of what puts it under pressure.
There's some evidence that they're working on. I want to say it's called something like Twitter articles, but maybe not extending the character count, but letting you attach something longer, which people, of course, always do just by putting in screenshots. But that might be a good way of
which I
splitting the
summarily
difference.
ignore.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. I don't like Twitter threads either, where you put a blog post and 15 Twitter posts. That bothers me too.
Hate that.
The top articles thing, which is part of Twitter Blue, is Twitter's kind of way of doing that.
Yeah, I'm always like, get a blog. Like if you're going to write something longer than 280 characters.
Yeah.
The Twitter Blue feature, which is sort of their repackaged version of the idea behind Nuzzle.
Nuzzle, that was what I was trying to remember in the past. Nuzzle was entirely Twitter driven. Yeah. I loved Nuzzle. Jonathan Abrams, the guy who created Friendster, last act, and Twitter bought it, and they kind of turned this into top articles, acknowledging that they are, in fact, a good place to get signals about what the zeitgeist is.
I think that they, a lot of times they just have a hard time doing, like everybody, all these companies they're not very good at many things. They're good at one thing that pays for everything. So Twitter's got a good feed. Google has Google AdWords and display ads. Everything else isn't, they do the best they can. Mail turned out well and YouTube turned out well, but they bought that. But most of it is, like most of their ideas, kind of go all over the place. And then Twitter, like they put out live streaming. I do live streaming, so I think about this. It's the worst platform for it. And you're like, it wouldn't be very hard to fix, but they
don't bungle
do it very
that
well.
a lot. Remember they bought Vine and killed it. What does Twitter call it? It's not Reels. What do they call it?
Spaces.
Spaces.
Yeah, it's like
That's their
the
Clubhouse.
We had Fleets for a while.
Fleets. That failed, right?
Twitter Spaces is fun. Fast Company, we've been doing Twitter Spaces, and actually they're pretty cool.
We record all of our interview episodes on Spaces now, because it's just so much. It's so easy to. We've done it. We've done Spaces where like Kayvon Bakpour of Twitter comes on because we're talking about Twitter product, and so he'll pop in, and it's really great for if you're talking about a topic and then somebody involved in that topic happens by, and you say, well, come up on stage, and then
that's Clubhouse, right? That's what.
Yeah, it is Clubhouse, but it's for podcasting purposes. It's amazing.
And it makes a lot of sense for it to be part of Twitter if you already are part of a community there versus having to become part of a community on Clubhouse.
Right.
You're not already invested in.
Are people still using Clubhouse?
Yeah.
Is anyone using it?
It isn't the number one download on the App Store, but people still
We got really excited about it for a while. We did a bunch of Clubhouse stuff, and then we were like, okay.
Why don't, this is my Twitter feed. Why don't I see Spaces? I used to see it at the top,
because
right? It's only mobile.
It's It's only, I think you can listen online, but in order
have
to
to be on mobile.
participate, you need to be on a phone. You can't even do it on an iPad at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big
and I hope
attempt
it's
to level
popular
things
enough
out.
that they build it out a bit.
Yeah.
You also, if you're one of the speakers, you only get in at the same time your audience does. So a lot of the time, the first couple of minutes are the speakers kind of getting their
Trying
act
to get
together and realizing they need to be on a phone. And it would be much nicer if you could kind of come in 5 minutes early and get yourself acclimated.
Don't
But
tell
I really
anyone
hope it's a
that's how
hit
TWiT
and that they
works,
build it
too.
out.
What do you do? What do you do, Brian?
I was going to say, don't tell anyone that's how TWiT works too. That we talk for 20 minutes before we.
Yeah, exactly.
Start.
What?
Well,
and
so
you didn't tell me?
So we did figure out how to hack that problem. Of the speakers getting their wits about them. Yeah. So what you do is there's a little box by a company called Studio Technologies. It's I can't remember which number it is. I have it around here somewhere, but it's what's called a Dante to Bluetooth. So what it does is it just has an Ethernet that pops in the back. Dante is an audio patching system that we use in events, and it looks like a headphone to the phone, right? And so it shows up as it says I'm a Bluetooth headphone, but what it does is it connects it to your entire audio system. So I have this mic and everything else can be inside of Spaces or Clubhouse, but then you can run the whole show if you wanted to from somewhere else, because we just didn't like the audio quality. So we were like, and we didn't like not be able to do pre-show and everything else. And so we did this a lot with Clubhouse, but it would work with Spaces as well, where you can have the whole conversation. We actually were doing the conversation over Zoom and then pumping it back into Clubhouse, and then everything sounds good, and we have all of our back channels and everything else.
Do
that we
normal
like to have for
people
a
know
show.
about Twitter? I mean, I know they see it on
They
TV.
know about them.
and
I don't
know
think that they
about it.
They know it
actually.
exists.
I don't.
But they don't use it.
They're watching all these TV shows that are 50% showing tweets.
Right.
Yeah, my parents know about Twitter, but they don't read it.
They would never join it or
No.
use it.
I think most of my family doesn't actually read it.
That's the biggest problem for Twitter, right? They only have 350 million active users, and and that's global. That's the biggest problem right there.
It turned out it's probably not something a billion people are going to use.
It's a niche product compared to Facebook, anyway.
I mean, I think it's a sad commentary in some ways on the tech business that you can have that many people on your service, and it's a disappointment. Compared to the days of magazines where there,
Right. If you had 350 million subscribers to Time Magazine,
if you had
you'd be done.
at PC World, we had 1.25 million, and
That's huge.
that was astonishing at the time.
That's
but
a huge number. Yeah.
I wish there was more of a place for things that like Twitter that were quite large, but not 1 to 2 billion people.
I don't mind. We're niche. TWiT's niche. Podcasting is, for the most part, niche, unless it's Caller Daddy or Joe Rogan. I
was
think
going to say, Leo, like the argument for Twitter is that it's a smaller audience, but maybe it's a more valuable audience. I mean, that hasn't been proven out by their revenue numbers. But again, that gets back to the beginning of this argument, which is, well, this is where the journalists and the famous people and this is where
that's kind of what you want to be, right? The influencer, the one that
that was the word that I was trying to avoid.
outsized weight. Oh, sorry. I made you use it.
No.
All right, I'm going to take a break because I'm done with Twitter.